Hello, my friends. I'm George Kors, and today we're talking about Kassandra by Christa Wolf. Now, this short novel, Kassandra, was released in the 1980s, and to my mind, Kassandra by Christa Wolf is one of the most important works of the 20th century. Now, hold on, we're gonna unpack that a lot because this is a short read. This is a really impactful psychological novel. However, before we talk about Kassandra by Christa Wolf, we probably need to talk about Christa Wolf and her status as an Eastern German writer first. Eastern German writers are widely underrepresented, particularly Christa Wolf, in contemporary discussions of literature from Europe and literature from Germany. This is a really complicated thing. The reunification of Germany is a really complicated and fraught topic. And much like the sort of chaos of our world politically right now, where we see right-wing governments taking shape in the United States and Argentina and possibly in Germany and possibly in France and in England and in other countries, we really are also seeing a lot of individuals, a lot of readers, a lot of intellectuals begin to read a lot of German literature and post-war German literature specifically with the goal of trying to unpack how a society dealt with this huge upheaval of, their society having embraced a genocidal right-wing government in the Nazis, of the collapse of their, country being split into multiple countries, and that split being a real focal point in the Cold War. There's a lot of chaos going on in post-war Germany, right? There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of very complicated feelings, and rightfully so. Their society descended into madness, into genocidal madness, and obviously it is one of the most famous, collapses of a society in the history of our species, without a doubt. So looking to post-war German literature as a place, as a reference point for how am I dealing with the contemporary madness that I'm seeing develop all around me, with the contemporary feeling of societal collapse, of far right-wing demagogues taking power, for example, that's all, I think, well-intended. Eastern Germans tend to be excluded in that. I do tend to see predominantly Western Germans. I see a few Austrians in there, but I very, very rarely, if ever, see an Eastern German included in a reading list that somebody is putting out there about post-war German literature. And that's through no fault of most contemporary readers. The reason is, and Christa Wolf is a prime example of this, is that Eastern German writers are very contentious. For one, many Eastern German writers were pro-communism, pro-socialism, and wrote socialist realist fiction. This, after the collapse, was not welcome in a lot of sort of capitalist-informed Western reading circles. So, a lot of contemporary critics in the 1990s who were celebrating the collapse of the Soviet Union and who thought that that was a good thing and that the right system of capitalism had prevailed, they were quick to dismiss writers such as Kassandra Wolf. Now, Kassandra Wolf herself is controversial because from 1959 to 1962, it is known that she worked as an inoffizielle Mitarbeiter with the Stasi. Now, let me unpack that for my non-German speaking folks. Basically, she was an informant for the Stasi for 3 years, for the Eastern German equivalent of the CIA, for example. And this is a really controversial thing. And if you know a little bit about Eastern Germany, you know that the Stasi, this Staatssicherheit apparatus, had a huge amount of power, wielded a huge amount of power, and wielded paranoia in significant and meaningful ways, turned people against each other throughout Eastern Germany to exercise a kind of authoritarian power, without a doubt. This is really, really well documented stuff. And if you have not seen The Lives of the Others, Das Leben der Anderen, which is a famous German film, this film, while a little sensational, actually does a really good job of portraying the Stasi apparatus in Eastern Germany. And I really recommend checking out Das Leben der Anderen, The Lives of the Others, because it really is a psychologically compelling film that really does a fantastic job of capturing that atmosphere. And a little background, I saw that film in Germany when it came out. I lived in former Eastern Germany, and when I saw that film in theaters when it came out, there were people sobbing in the seats. It really, really is one of those films that did capture that energy in a meaningful way as a piece of art. Returning to Kassandra and returning to Christa Wolf, Christa Wolf works for a brief time as an IM, and that is a very controversial thing. And I don't know that it's worthy of dismissing Christa Wolf over, because we do see other famous post-war German writers doing much worse work in these situations. Christa Wolf was young in this instance. She was in her early 30s, and that doesn't necessarily excuse it. What she did was wrong, but she does go on to really write complex things. And I think of the post-war German writers, this is a relatively innocuous situation. Günter Grass was a Hitlerjugend, and there are other famous writers that get excused for all sorts of things. Celan, the French Nazi, Vichy France Nazi, for example, comes to mind as somebody who people are excusing. And I don't see folks excusing Christa Wolf, rightfully so. And I think part of this is because Christa Wolf was also dismissed in those 1990s as a writer because of sexism. And it's because works like Kassandra are deeply feminist in nature and really progressive and really critical of patriarchal structures in our societies. That, I think, coupled with the fact of being a socialist realist author at times, for example, Der Geteilte Himmel, The Divided Sky, which I'll talk about later, I think that has led to Christa Wolf being roundly dismissed by a lot of critics, and wrongfully so. I think, Christa Wolf as a writer is so talented at crafting sentences, so just sharp with the way that she writes an author's psychology and the way that she writes an author's, criticisms of society, that I think if you're out there reading post-war German literature, trying to find those voices that are going to speak to how complicated your own position is in your own complicated society, I think Christa Wolf is one of the places to look. Now, Kassandra by Christa Wolf came out in 1983. And Kassandra, as you may have guessed, is a figure of Greek myth. We are reading a retelling of the Kassandra narrative, and it is told from Kassandra's perspective. Now, Kassandra, just to give a sort of macrocosmic TLDR summary of this is in the lead up to the Trojan War. Kassandra is a seer. Nobody believes her. Okay, so it's this sort of fraught position that she's in where she knows what's going to happen. She's seeing the downfall of the society around her, and yet nobody believes her when she says, hey guys, this is going to happen. And Christa Wolf is retelling that story here. Like many of Christa Wolf's works, like most of them, this novel is extremely, extremely concise, less than 200 pages. Now, luckily for my English folks out there who are reading English, this is translated. Just swap out the K at the beginning of Kassandra for a C, and you'll find a translation of this. It's probably out of print, would be my guess. It might not be super expensive, but I would guess that it's out of print. Now, this novel, I think, is so tightly done. It is really, really sharp. Every sentence is deeply psychological. And to my taste, when I was going through this, I was really, just pleased with how Christa Wolf took me along this psychological ride of this person not being believed. And I think what's even more telling and important here is that Christa Wolf does something that a lot of different German writers have done in the past. This is something we see with Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain and other works, which is that there are allegorical characters in this novel who stand to represent certain individuals or systems. And some of these are really important, and I want to highlight them like right off the bat as we're beginning to start to talk about Kassandra, to sort of show the critical lens that Christa Wolf is taking here. And I think, for my folks who are out there, we're 10 minutes in and you're saying, oh, this person worked as an informant for the Stasi. I'm not going to read them. That crosses the line. I think maybe stick around and let's talk about Kassandra first before you do that. Because I think Christa Wolf is really reflecting in a meaningful way on the experience of an individual in this society. And when we look at how many informants the Stasi had, that is unfortunately one of those experiences that we have to look at here. And the allegorical characters in this novel do sort of speak to, decades later, maybe how Christa Wolf is feeling about the system as she's seen it develop. And a system that is in the midst of collapse as well, which is important for us as readers to acknowledge, is that in Eastern Germany, in Western Germany, individuals were aware that this Eastern German Democratic Republic, that the further Soviet republics, they were aware that the sustainability of the system was probably not as present as the system was implying. Okay, this is probably a feeling that you might have right now in your country. Circling back, our allegorical characters here. There's a few I want to highlight. First, and we've talked about the Stasi, is Oimelos. Oimelos, I don't know. Oimelos, I don't know how to pronounce Greek names in English, so you guys are just going to have to bear with me on this one because I legit have never read the Greeks in English. It's a weird flex, I know, I'm sorry. But Oimelos is allegorical for the Stasi. So anytime you're reading this book, you see Oimelos in the scene, think about that state security apparatus because there is that allegorical representation there. Hekabe. Hekabe is representing the party, the SED. Okay, so anytime you see Hekabe in a scene, think, okay, party politics. This is what the party wants. All right? Very important, this next one. Marpesa. Marpesa represents the arbeitende Massen, the masses of the workers. Okay, so anytime I'm seeing Marpesa on the page, I'm thinking about, allegorically speaking, the worker. All right? And then finally, Arisbe. Arisbe stands for the Frauenbewegung, the women's movement. And right off the bat, Arisbe is a great transition here. This novel is approaching this retelling of the Kassandra narrative, which is told from Kassandra's perspective. That is being approached in a deeply feminist manner and with this really patriarchal critical lens attached to it. Now, this is, talking about patriarchy, talking about feminism, these have entered into our popular culture in the United States in a big way. They're also entered into the popular culture in Germany right now, so my Germans watching are going to be familiar with that as well. And I think, after 2015, really escalating after 2020, we talked about feminism in a popular sense before that, but because of the internet and because of social media, we really have ratcheted up discussions of patriarchy and discussions of feminism. And I think the way that Christa Wolf approaches the patriarchy here, criticizes patriarchal institutions, and is connecting those dots between, let's say, the Stasi and a greater sort of sense of patriarchal sexism that is embedded in a society is masterfully done. You have to, you guys, folks have seen on the channel where sometimes you got to take the hat off to a writer. I got to take my hat off to Christa Wolf in this narrative because holy smokes. I mean, just the sharpest knife of the patriarchy that I have seen. Really, really, really well done. I mean, Christa Wolf did such a fantastic job in less than 200 pages here, unpacking those feelings, unpacking that psychology. You feel in your chest, in your gut, when you're reading from Kassandra's perspective, you feel the intensity of those feelings. You feel the heightened sensibility, the heightened stakes that the individuals are experiencing here when they interact with different people in this novel. And let me just say this. I listed off maybe, 4 or 5 allegorical characters here. For folks who love Greek mythology, Kassandra includes so many characters. It includes so many famous characters from Greek histories and Greek mythologies. And Christa Wolf is not holding back. The amount of characters that appear in this novel are staggering. For 200 pages, huge cast of characters. But I would really recommend just paying attention to Oimelos, Hekabe, Marpesa, and Arisbe. All right? Just pay attention to those. When those individuals come into the narrative, just engage that extra bit of paying attention, because Christa Wolf is doing something intentional in those moments. And that's when I think even a passive reading of this novel is going to really get us a lot of critical of the patriarchy style criticisms going on here. That feminist lens is predominant throughout, and it is exceptionally well done. I would say, Kassandra Wolf did a really excellent job. And the reason why earlier I was saying, yes, we are operating with the understanding that she worked as an informant for a few years. This narrative, Kassandra specifically, is demonstrating for us that intellectual maturation of a person who has led a deeply complex and fraught life. And there's no way of denying that Christa Wolf is a genius, and the way that she's processing Eastern German society, a society that is, by 1983, in the time that this novel is published, pretty widely seen to be collapsing in a lot of ways. The way that she's processing her own experiences, her own feelings of love for her society, love for her other individual people in her life, her own, misinformed experiences as an informant, that is really a lot of that undercurrent that's going on here. And I this is not biographical at all. However, writers, and I'll say this as a novelist myself, writers use their experiences to inform what they write. That doesn't mean that every bit of fiction is autobiographical. Far from it. In fact, I think that's one of the cringiest questions to ask an author. Hey, who are you in this novel? Who am I in this novel, if you know them, right? I think that's just one of the silliest and most cringe questions you could possibly ask. However, Christa Wolf really experienced life in the Eastern German Democratic Republic and was able to inform this retelling of the Kassandra narrative in a deeply meaningful and philosophical and psychological manner because of those experiences. And I have to say, that sometimes, pardon me, you read a novel and you're just floored by the talent shown on the page. Sometimes it feels like an individual was meant to write this novel. And I feel like Kassandra by Christa Wolf might be one of those instances where I was really taken aback just by how every single sentence I'm reading really hits you in the chest in a major way. And that I think brings me to one aspect of Kassandra that I've highlighted, time and time again here in this video, but I really want to press on, which is the psychological nature of the narrative. When it comes to stream of consciousness writing, when it comes to, delving into the psychologies of different characters and different perspectives, this novel, Kassandra, is 0 to 100 the entire time. You start on that first page and it is no holds barred the entire time. And there are individual lines here that stand out that I was just floored by. I had to set the novel down in order to recover from this moment of, psychological insight that Christa Wolf is affording me as a reader. And particularly the ending of the novel. I'm not going to spoil it here right now. I'm looking at it. And I just, every time I think about this novel, I think about this novel all the time. I think about this last page, the last few lines of this novel, I am just blown away by. And I think Kassandra as a character is so everlasting because of this duality that she faces. Kassandra is a seer, is confident, knows beyond a shadow of a doubt what the future brings. And yet those around her don't believe her. And she has to make those complicated decisions on how to lead her life, how to respond to the developing Trojan War, how to respond to the people she loves, to the community that she loves, knowing that they won't believe her, knowing that even though she could help them, in this world she can't. That is a feeling that I think is ubiquitously shared throughout all generations of humanity when our societies are prone to chaos. And I think that post-war German era, I think Weimar Germany through Nazi Germany, this is a chaotic time. The entirety of the split German experience is a chaotic time. So we see a lot of writers navigating this feeling that Kassandra has, which is, I know something, but nobody else believes me. What am I going to do? Right? We also see this in Uwe Johnson's work. You see this with Gesine Crespal narrating her family history. There are characters in that novel. They know this is going to happen. They know this descent into madness is going to happen, but nobody around them believes them or wants to do anything about it. This is a feeling I think I see Americans having all the time. I think with this past election, over the summer, individuals knew, hey, this Trump guy is going to get reelected. And this time, after January 6th, it's going to be different. And time again, you would speak to individuals. They would know this, but they knew that nothing that they would do, there's that disconnect occurring. And that disconnect is portrayed so well in Kassandra. I don't know of a novel that portrays it better. In all the literature I've read, I'm not sure that I could name a novel that portrays that contradiction inside of your soul better than Christa Wolf did with this retelling of the Kassandra narrative. And this is why for me, going back to this discussion of Eastern German writers and how roundly dismissed they've been, you're a socialist realist, you're advocating for an authoritarian system, yada, yada, yada. A lot of these criticisms are things that if you're an American, maybe you're Canadian, maybe you're English, maybe, I don't know. If you're from a capitalist country that won the Cold War, you probably heard this in childhood, of like, oh, the good guys won. And that obviously is a complex and fraught situation, and for those of us who were, born at the tail end of the Cold War or born afterwards, we had a lot less skin in the game than, our elders did. And that's evident when you interact and you speak with people. I think for me, the importance of reading the Eastern German writers, and particularly Christa Wolf, is portrayed by and large, to me, by the political situation in Germany. We see right now a huge swelling of support for the far-right extremist party, the AfD. And a lot of this support comes from former Eastern Germany. And former Eastern Germans have endured for a long time decades of being dismissed widely within, cultural circles. And there's even a term for the sort of nostalgia that Eastern Germans feel. That's almost mockingly used by a lot of people. This is a phrase, Ostalgie. I think this disconnect that people feel with each other leads to this uptick in really far-right extremist thinking. When you feel isolated, when you feel cast aside, that has been shown to make individuals more prone to far-right thinking when you're not feeling connected or interconnected with that community. And I think right now, reading Christa Wolf and acknowledging just how complicated and fraught and psychologically compelling this Eastern German literature is really essential and really important. You know, I've talked quite a few times on the channel about having some humility in our reading practice, being humble. And usually I talk about being humble in the sense of, hey, you're not going to understand every single word that's on a page, and you shouldn't, and you never will. You know, this is not the reality of language. You know, language is always in flux, always changing, and it's so difficult, right? Of course, without a doubt. And we need to have that humility to accept, hey, I'm not going to understand everything here. I also think we need to have that humility with the individuals that we read. I think everybody needs to have that sort of critical lens where they choose who and who not to read based off of, you know, their own critical feelings about society. But I think for Americans right now, and probably for Western Germans, I think there's a point where we need to maybe be a little bit more humble when we approach the Eastern Germans. And maybe need to understand that reading Christa Wolf is not the sin to our society as it may have been implied to be by a lot of sexist critics in the 1990s and early 2000s. And, you know, this is a complicated conversation I've seen time and time again. And I mentioned Louise Ferdinand Céline earlier, so we'll use Céline as my example. You know, I don't read Céline, and I won't read Céline. And it is because Céline, for me, crosses lines that I'm uncomfortable with. And that, I think, is important to acknowledge, is that each individual intellectual, each individual reader out there, each individual writer, you have your capacity to determine what is comfortable or uncomfortable for you. And Céline, Louise Ferdinand Céline, for me, crosses every line that I'm just like, I'm not going to read Death on the Installment Plan. It's just not for me. I'm sure the novel's lovely, you know, as an iconoclast, whatever. But, you know, go read his Wikipedia page, and you'll know why I don't read him. All right? Every individual has that capacity to make those decisions, and you should make those decisions. And those decisions will not align with everybody. And that's totally great. I think, however, we drew some conclusions collectively as Western Germans, as Americans, about Christa Wolf before really giving a lot of grace to Christa Wolf and considering the complexities that she experienced as a writer and as a person in Eastern German society. And I think, having delved into a lot of Christa Wolf's literature, I have said time and time again on the channel that I want to advocate that folks read and listen to Christa Wolf more than they do. This is one of the goals I have in this channel outside of, you know, promoting my own writing. And the reason for that is, you know, having thought deeply about Christa Wolf's experience as a person, having thought deeply about Eastern German society, you know, when I was a teen and lived in former Eastern Germany, listening to the individuals around me, you know, learning those experiences from the people who were there, I think for me, you know, Christa Wolf merits some significant reads, very much so. You know, in a personal way, you know, when I was living in former Eastern Germany and talking to all the people around me and just curious about their history, people were very willing to volunteer their stories and share their stories with me. I met individuals who crossed the border and ran away. I met individuals who were unofficial informants who deeply regretted it. And all manner of folks in between who navigated a really complex system. And right now we're navigating a really complex system, and we're having a really complex time. And while I think Christa Wolf crosses a line by having been an informant, I don't think it crosses the same line for me that other writers who are widely read have crossed. Céline crosses much more significant lines, is genocidal in his ideation, and is still relatively widely read. Christa Wolf is a progressive feminist who supports a socialist nation. Was it bad that she was an informant? Absolutely. Should she not have done that? Absolutely. That goes without saying. I think Christa Wolf would have said that to you in 1983 when this novel was published. But we see the machinations of sexism at work here, right? We see the overarching sort of commentary and dismissive commentary about feminist writing at work here. And Kassandra, this is really a beautiful novel. At the end of the day, I've talked so much about politics here. I've talked so much about society and history. Fine, put all that aside. If that's not your thing, pause. This novel is beautiful. It's beautifully written. I have to reiterate this. Every sentence that I'm dealing with here, I'm just enamored with. You know, Christa Wolf was such an incredibly concise and sharp writer. And I've said this a few times on the channel. I have to, take my hat off to writers who can write a good sentence. This is the most basic thing that we can get to as a writer. Can you craft a good sentence? And in the original, Christa Wolf is crafting some damn fine sentences. Time and time again, I open up this novel to a random page and I am just absolutely pleased with the artistry on display here by Christa Wolf, who deserves recognition as one of Germany's premier writers in the 20th century. If we're talking about Kafka, if we're talking about Thomas Mann, we should probably be talking about Christa Wolf too. And that's a controversial take, and I know a lot of my German viewers out there are going to be, have a lot of complicated opinions about that. I know folks are going to say Thomas Bernhard, maybe. Maybe they're going to say Günter Grass. Maybe you dare say Arno Schmidt. But, at the end of the day, Christa Wolf merits inclusion in this high-level consideration of the post-war German literature movement. Her work is astounding. Such short, concise novels that really just grab the reader and take them on a psychological journey time and time again that I think is really important to our current moment. One of the things I've been trying to do in selecting videos for folks on the channel here is to select videos that are important and reflect, select literature that's important and reflective on our current moment. And I think, Kassandra by Christa Wolf, this is up there. Another novel that I've spoken about being at that moment where we are at right now is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I would say both of these, I would read both of them. And luckily Cassandra's in translation. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's in print or not. You might need to buy it used. My edition is used. And it has notes from, maybe 5 or 6 different people before me. But this is an impressively important read to me. I really, I can't speak highly enough about Christa Wolf, and I can't speak highly enough about Kassandra. This novel is so just important to me and my feelings about the society that's around me every moment that I'm awake. I think I'm an individual, as a writer. Obviously, one of the ways that I interpret the world around me is through the creation of art, is through the writing of novels. That's something that I've been doing for a long time now. And I've said this on the channel before, I think part of being a member of a society is engaging with the cultural objects of a society. And we have this huge interconnected global world where all these societies are interconnected with one another. It's beautiful. It's awesome. I love it. And we owe it to ourselves to be experiencing a lot of cultural objects, not just from our own culture, but from other cultures, to, really build up a nuanced understanding of our world. And I think it's probably time for folks to begin engaging more seriously with Eastern German literature. And I think the writer to begin with, in my opinion, is Christa Wolf. Her novels skew very short. They're very concise. And she's such a beautiful writer. I think, even if you're not reading this in the original, you're reading this in translation, I think you're in for a really compelling and enlightening read. That's I think that's important to acknowledge here. Let's talk about some further recommendations. I'm gonna start off by recommending another book by Christa Wolf. This is Socialist Realism, and I love this beautiful cover here. This is Der Geteilte Himmel, The Divided Sky. This is also in translation, probably also out of print. This is a love story, two individuals, one who, as Berlin is divided in that post-war period, and they are going to begin constructing the wall. One partner goes to the west, one remains in the east. The protagonist of this works in a factory. If you're looking for socialist realism, if you're looking for that depiction of what a socialist society was looking like in the 1960s, I think Der Geteilte Himmel is probably, The Divided Sky is probably for you. Also psychological, also beautiful, also just a beautiful love story. I think reading both of these really shows the talent that Christa Wolf brings to writing, just in how different these two novels are. Really does demonstrate her fantastic ability she had as a writer. Next up, I've done a video on this, is Catalan Street by Magda Szabo. Magda Szabo was very critical of her sort of Hungarian social society. Had a very different experience from Christa Wolf. But this novel, I think, Catalan Street, is just really provocative and shows a psychological perspective over a series of years that I think is really valuable. And to my taste, looking at this from the Hungarian perspective, looking at this from Szabo's perspective, I think is really important. That I think that is, and if we're talking about societal collapse, this is a really important one. This novel, Catalan Street, for us to consider. Next up, a novel that I haven't recommended yet on the channel, but I probably should do a video on. I really love this novel. Sharnush Parsipur's Women Without Men. This is, Parsipur is an Iranian writer, and Women Without Men has a little bit of magical realist sensibilities to it, although I won't explicitly call it a magical realist novel. I think it might scratch that itch for some folks who really like magical realism. And Women Without Men, I think I was really reminded of Women Without Men by Parsipur by Kassandra, in the way that, for example, when Cassandra is interacting with, a large group of women, and the way those women interact and talk about society, I was really reminded of, oh man, Women Without Men is such a great novel, and reminds me of that in that way. And this novel is really volatile. It's really excellent. And I see very few people talking about Parsipur and talking about Women Without Men. There's also an excellent film adaptation of this as well. This needs to be on more people's lists, guaranteed. I should do a video on this, because Parsipur is a genius, and Women Without Men is a work of genius as well. I want to thank you for being here today and hanging out with me. I think it's important to me that we advocate for a wide range of literature, because I really am of the opinion that literary talent is ubiquitous. And I'll sort of end the video by talking about how, as a writer, I think the system that publishes novels in the United States has a perspective predicated on money and making money. And that perspective implies that literary talent is not ubiquitous, that it is rare. And if you see folks like the folks from The Blacklist, or see folks like, if you ever like seeing agents talk about it, you'll see like, oh, only the cream of the crop rises to the top here. This is only the best writers will get recognized here. And that sort of language is fine. It's kind of junky, whatever thinking. The reason why I recommend novels as widely as I possibly can, from as many different cultures as I possibly can, is because that literary talent is ubiquitous. Storytelling is ubiquitous. And widespread, there are fantastic novels out there that share the psychologies and perspectives and histories and ideas and philosophies and politics of so many different individuals. And right now, we are in a really complex moment in American society. You know, if you're out there watching that and you are in denial about how complicated this moment is, maybe you need to look in the mirror and do some self-reflection. Hate to be that YouTuber that tells you that, right? But we are there. And we are so lucky to have an overpopulation of great literature out there. And to my taste, Christa Wolf is one of those individuals who should be more so at the forefront of people's minds. Definitely, to my taste, is a writer who deserves more than we contemporarily have given in terms of affording that individual attention. And hey, you know, Parsipur too. I think, and you know, of course, Magda Java as well. You know, these writers, you know, they really do a fantastic job of delving into psychology. This is, you know, this is something that I think is the bread and butter of all writers, which is getting into human psychology and seeing how we can navigate this, how we can learn from it, how it reflects our history, how it reflects our politics, how it reflects our philosophies, our morals, our ethics. And what can I say aside from the fact that, sorry, the wrong book. Kassandra is one of those novels that does this fantastically, does it beautifully. And every time I open that novel, I'm deeply impressed. And I'm excited to tell people about it. I'm excited to engage with it. Just really beautiful, beautiful sentence writing, really compelling psychology, and just an unforgettable novel. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I know I've been all over the place today. I was really digressing a lot today. So I hope you got something from this video. I hope you're, you know, willing to get out there and engage with some Christa Wolf. I promise you it's really, really worth your while to engage with Christa Wolf and Kassandra. You know, this is really, really fantastic work. So please do strongly consider it. And if you have read Christa Wolf, get down in the comments below and let us know what you have read and tell us how you liked it. I always want to hear from you folks. As always, buy my novel, Always the Wanderer. You can buy it wherever you buy books. Go ahead and ask for it. And this is the best way to support me. If you like my videos, best way to support me, buy my novel. Buy it for your friends. Share it around. And you can find me at my website, georgekors.com, if you want to learn more about me. I've got some good stuff up there on the website as well as on the YouTube channel, including me reading from Work in Progress that you guys can check out there. And you can follow me on socials that I may or may not use at gbk7288. Thank you, folks. I hope you're safe. I hope you're having a wonderful time out there. I hope you're engaging in a critical reading practice that's meaningful to you. And I will see you next time. Thank you, folks, so much for watching. Like and subscribe. See you later. Stay safe, folks.